Welcome every pony. Today is Tuesday, October 25th, 2011, and this is Vos de Sueños After Dark. Today we have Past Sins Chapter 3, School Days and Memories by Penstroke, assisted by Batty Gloom. Nyx stood close to Twilight's front leg as she looked ahead. Before the pair was a building, painted in rich, welcoming red colors and surrounded by a lush green yard. The building was decorated with festive hearts. Even the weather vane on the top of the bell tower featured a heart, looking almost like Cupid's arrow. A playground was visible out behind the building, while in front was a flagpole and a hedge sculpture of a pony wearing a square, flat-topped hat with a tassel. A welcoming sight to most young ponies in the community, and a place of fond memories to many of Ponyville's residents. A place of learning, where ponies studied for a bright future and made good friends. Ponyville Elementary Schoolhouse, where the mulberry-colored earth pony Cherliee granted the gift of knowledge to her students. It was a place that utterly terrified Nyx.
"Do I really have to go?"
the black-coated filly asked, trying her best to hide behind Twilight's leg.
"Yes,"
Twilight replied.
"For how long?"
Nyx whined.
"You're signed up for the morning class, so you'll be done around lunchtime. I'll come back to pick you up then." "But I didn't have to go to school before. Why do I have to go now?" "It's important for you to get a good education,"
Twilight replied, though it wasn't the whole truth. Yes, she felt it was important for Nyx to go to school, but it was also part of her disguise. If she was going to school, it would be easier for ponies to believe that she was just an average unicorn filly and Twilight's cousin. Nyx was also becoming just a little too clingy at the library. She had a thirst for knowledge that was almost unquenchable, and Twilight hadn't been able to get much research done into the cult's spell. She found Nyx's curiosity wonderful and wanted to encourage it, but she needed to be able to get her own studies done as well, and maybe have a few hours to herself.
"Can't I just stay at the library with you?"
Nyx pleaded.
"The whole point of school is to learn new things," Twilight replied. "You've been learning everything you can from me and Rarity, and you've been having a lot of fun. Now, you're just going to go learn from Cherliee instead, and actually be in a class with other fillies and colts." "But I know you and your friends, and I don't know Cherliee. What if she's mean?"
Twilight chuckled a little at Nyx's fear.
"Don't worry, Cherliee is very nice. Just pay attention in class and remember to follow the rules. That means both Cherlie's rules and my rules, which are... I can't take off the vest, I can't take off my glasses, I can't tell any pony about my wings or that I'm an alicorn, and I should try not to use my magic unless I'm writing something down. And try to make some friends,"
Twilight added, rubbing a hoof against the little filly's head in a playful noogie. Nyx giggled, escaping from Twilight's hoof before looking up at the unicorn, curiosity gleaming in her eye.
"Are friends really that important?" "Trust me. Nothing is more important than having good friends,"
Twilight said, taking a step forward as the school bell began to ring.
"Now come on. If we just keep standing here, you're going to be late." "Good morning, class,"
Cherliee said in a sing-song voice as she stood at the front of the room.
Good morning, Cherliee.
The class echoed back, some honestly meaning it while others were just saying it because that's what the teacher expected.
"Now, before I get started, I have a small announcement. We have a new student joining us today, and her name is Nyx,"
Cherliee said, motioning to the black-coated filly standing next to her.
"And I expect you all to welcome her as you would any new student." "Yes, Cherliee. Yes, Cherliee,"
the class chimed back. The mulberry teacher gave a pleased nod before turning to Nyx.
"Good. Now go ahead and find a seat. You can take any open desk you like."
Nyx nodded gently before she looked across at a dozen desks. The schoolhouse only had 9 desks the day before, but in preparation for having a new student, Cherliee had brought another 3 desks out from storage. The room was now laid out with 4 columns of 3 desks each. The rest of the class was sitting to one side of the room, leaving an entire column of empty desks to the left of the students. Nyx looked at each seat. Twilight had told her to sit as close to the front as possible, but at the same time, Nyx didn't feel brave enough to sit in the very front, at least not on the first day. With only 3 rows of desks to choose from, that only left one desk that really worked. Nix walked to the middle desk, setting down the saddlebags Twilight had packed for her that morning before taking a seat. Directly to her right was an earth pony with a grayish magenta coat and a mane that was a mixture of white and violet. Nix couldn't help but notice she was wearing a tiara very similar to the tiara she had for a cutie mark. It was only then that Nix realized the pony she was staring at was staring back, and not in a good way. The tiara-wearing pony wore an expression of annoyance, as if Nix's very presence offended her. Nix shrank away from the other filly, not sure what to do. But then she remembered what Twilight had told her. Gathering what courage she could, Nix gave a very sheepish smile and gently waved her hoof. But the tiara-wearing pony just humped and turned her head away, lifting her nose a little. It was an action that made Nix slump down in her seat, turning her attention to the front of the room, where Cherliee was writing something on the board. School was not going to be fun at all. School was amazing. Nix could only smile, horns shimmering as she took notes feverishly. Cherliee had started the day's lesson with some history, talking about the founding of Ponyville by Earth Ponies and why the town honored some of the traditions they did, focusing on the town's seasonal traditions.
Now, are there any questions before we go to recess?
Cherliee asked, not expecting to see a single hoof in the air since her students were always more interested in taking their recess. Still, the teacher couldn't help but smile when she saw a particular black hoof in the air, one she had seen raised several times before, the sign of an eager student.
Yes, Nix, what's your question? How was winter wrap-up done before there were Pegasus ponies in Ponyville? That's a very good question, Nix,
the teacher replied, pleased with her inquisitiveness.
While it is tradition that magic isn't used to clean up winter, few ponies realize that, back when the tradition started, there weren't Pegasi around. So how did they clean up the clouds and get the birds back? Well, if you don't mind getting to recess a little later than usual, I can tell you that originally the earth ponies in this town were...
And Cherliee was off, going much deeper into her lecture. Nix was happy, already jotting down fresh notes. Her note-taking, however, was interrupted as Nix felt something hit the side of her head. Looking down at the floor, she saw it was a piece of paper, and upon looking up, she saw a number of her classmates were glaring at her fairly coldly for delaying recess. Nix shrank down to her desk, whimpering a little as she wondered what she had done wrong. She had just asked a question. She was just curious.
Well, am I glad to get outside?
Applebloom said about 15 minutes later, when Cherliee had finished talking about how earth ponies cleared the clouds.
I'm just glad Cherliee didn't cancel recess because of the question that new filly asked. But it was pretty cool seeing how the earth ponies were able to clear the skies and bring back the southern birds before there were Pegasi in town.
Twist argued as she and Applebloom walked outside down the steps of the schoolhouse, heading into the playground area.
Yeah, it was kind of cool, but I'd still rather have recess. So, what do you want to do? You want to take turns sitting on the swing?
Twist asked, pointing at the swing in question.
Sure,
Applebloom replied as the pair jogged. Twist arrived first, jumping on the wooden swing as she began to put her weight into swinging. Applebloom stood back, watching as her friend swung higher and higher into the air. It wasn't the highest the farm filly had seen some pony reach on the swing, but respectable.
Hey,
Twist called as she reached the top of her forward swing.
What is it? I think Silver Spoon and Diamond Tiara are talking to the new filly,
Twist said, saying a few bits of her sentence each time she swung down by Applebloom. The farm filly turned her head, seeing that the school bullies had caught the new filly just as she came outside for recess. The three of them were talking on the schoolhouse steps.
What do you think they're talking about? Nothing good if I know those two,
Applebloom said before turning in that direction.
Twist, stay here a second. I'll be right back. Oh, okay.
Twist called, continuing to swing but watching as her yellow earth pony friend made her way across the playground. Thankfully, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon had their backs to the rest of the playground, so they couldn't see Applebloom approaching. This allowed the yellow filly to listen and hear what the two bullies were saying.
So, we don't appreciate nerds like you making us almost miss recess.
Diamond Tiara said, pointing an accusing hoof.
That class is already so boring without you asking a bunch of questions,
Silver Spoon added.
We get enough of that from Twist.
But at least Twist is bearable. That, and she doesn't have an ugly coat like yours.
Nyx cringed, lowering her head as her ears flattened, tears forming in her eyes.
Ugly?
She barely sniffled out. The two Earth ponies looked at each other with malicious smirks before they turned their attention back to Nyx.
Yeah, ugly,
Diamond Tiara sneered.
The absolute worst color. I would just die if I had a black coat.
Silver Spoon nodded her head in agreement, scrunching up her nose in disgust.
Me too. Not only is black like so ugly, but it's creepy too. Only things like spiders, bats, and ticks are supposed to be black. Not ponies. It's just unnatural.
She probably likes bugs. Why, I bet she's covered in ticks this very moment. Ew,
Silver Spoon replied, sticking her tongue out before the two fillies began to chant evilly together.
Nyx has ticks, Nyx has ticks, Nyx has ticks.
I do not.
Nyx whimpered, trying to defend herself, but lacking the courage or conviction needed to get the bullies to stop. Tears were already flowing from her eyes, only fueling the sadistic mood of the two class bullies.
Aw, what's the matter?
Diamond Tiara mocked with fake sympathy.
Are you going to cry like a little fool?
I bet she is. She's been teary-eyed the whole time we've been talking to her. You're like such a crybaby.
Nyx couldn't stand it anymore. She collapsed on the ground and proceeded to wail, making the two Earth ponies laugh, not noticing a yellow filly sneaking up behind them.
So, like, crying is supposed to be your special talent or something?
Diamond Tiara taunted.
Nah, she doesn't even have a cutie mark,
Silver Spoon noted, pointing to Nyx's blank flanks.
Wow, I so didn't notice that before, laughed Diamond Tiara. So she's a nerd, a creep, a crybaby, and a blank flank. She's like the biggest loser in the whole school.
More like the biggest loser in Ponyville.
Silver Spoon corrected, making Nyx only cry harder. The two bullies continued to laugh until Diamond Tiara was suddenly shoved to the ground, namesake Tiara falling off her head and into the dirt.
Oh my gosh, Tiara!
Silver Spoon exclaimed, her eyes darting until she saw a furious Applebloom standing just a few feet away. Silver Spoon quickly connected the dots and glared at the yellow farm filly.
Like, you're gonna be in so much trouble now?
My tiara!
Diamond Tiara cried out, turning and glaring daggers at Applebloom.
You got dirt on my tiara! I'm telling Cherliee! Fine, Applebloom challenged. If you do that, then I'll tell her you were being mean. Oh, what, and you think she'll believe you?
Diamond Tiara said, pointing a hoof at Applebloom.
Nyx is crying and Twist is watching the whole thing. Is not,
Diamond Tiara protested. Applebloom, however, just smirked and pointed a hoof at behind her, where Twist, still on the swings, was watching the whole thing. Silver Spoon grabbed Diamond Tiara's tiara, doing her best to wipe the dirt off the treasured crown.
Come on, Diamond Tiara. This is like so not worth our time getting in trouble for.
Fine. You win this round, blank flank. Have fun with your new friend and all of her ticks.
Diamond Tiara sneered before turning away.
Let's get out of here, Silver Spoon.
Applebloom watched the pair retreat before huffing and scraping her hoof on the ground.
Someday I'd like to buck some sense into those two, just like my big sister would. She never got teased in school. Then again, she got in trouble for fighting.
Applebloom grumbled before turning around.
You okay?
Nyx nodded, still crying, but beginning to calm down. She carefully removed her glasses to rub the tears out of her eyes. Nyx kept her eyes closed the entire time her glasses were off, not wanting to get teased about her strange eyes, and did not open her eyes again until the glasses were back where they belonged, perched on the filly's nose.
Why are those two so mean?
Sniveled Nyx.
Personally, I think it's their special talents, and that they should just have bully cutie marks, but I guess it's just like kind of having a special talent for arguing. There just isn't a cutie mark that really makes sense for being a bully. I'm Applebloom, by the way.
The yellow filly chirped as she put out a hoof. The disguised Alicorn looked at the hoof for a bit before shakily offering up her own in a rather weak hoof shake.
I'm Nyx.
Well, howdy, Twilight. What brings you round these here parts?
Applejack greeted, trotting up to the purple unicorn.
Oh, hey Applejack, I'm just on my way to the schoolhouse,
Twilight replied as the farm mare started to walk with her.
Well, that's where I'm heading. I'm picking up Apple Bloom from school today. Need her help running some errands in town. What about yourself? I'm picking up Nix. Nix, that cousin of yours?
Applejack asked, surprised.
Since when that little filly start going to school? Well, today was her first day, actually. First day of school's never easy, especially when you just moved to a new place. Yeah, I remember the first day I transferred from my old school to Celestia's School for Gifted Unicorns.
Twilight reminisced.
It was scary, but I really didn't have to deal with a lot of the older students, being Celestia's private pupil and all. Still, doesn't this mean Apple Bloom and Nix are in class together?
I reckon it does. You think they've met? Applejack asked as the pair rounded a bend in the path, the school coming into view. Twilight smiled, taking notice of a couple of fillies playing together just outside the schoolhouse.
I'd say they've more than just met.
Applejack followed Twilight's eyes, and then the pair stopped and watched from a distance as Apple Bloom playfully chased Nix around. The pair of young mares watched the fillies play for a few moments before resuming their approach. Applejack called out to her little sister, causing both Apple Bloom and Nix to run in their direction.
Hey, Apple Bloom, how's school today?
Applejack asked once the fillies were within earshot.
It was really fun, and I made a new friend,
Apple Bloom said with a smile.
Is it her?
Applejack asked.
Yep, Applejack, this is Nix. Nix, this is my big sister Applejack.
The yellow filly said, proudly introducing her sister.
Wait, your big sister is Applejack?
Nix asked, glancing with a confused expression at Apple Bloom.
You already know my big sister?
Apple Bloom asked in return, reflecting Nix's confusion on her own face.
She should,
the orange farm pony interrupted.
Twilight brought Nix here to see me and all our other friends.
Why would she do that?
Apple Bloom asked, cocking her head to one side.
Because Nix is my cousin, and she's staying with me at the library,
Twilight answered with her simple lie.
Wow, that's cool,
Apple Bloom said excitedly.
Did you know Twilight once beat an Ursa Minor all by herself?
Nix's eyes went wide, looking at the purple unicorn in awe and admiration.
You did?
Well, yes, but I really wouldn't call what I did beating it,
Twilight clarified modestly.
The Ursa Minor was just cranky from being woken up, so I gave it some milk and rocked it back to sleep.
But it was still really cool,
Apple Bloom offered.
So, did anything else happen at school today?
Twilight asked, trying to steer the conversation away from her defeat of the Ursa Minor.
Some of the other fillies in class were mean to me. Oh, and Cherliee wanted me to give you something,
Nix said, her horn glowing as her saddlebags clicked open. A note floated in the air, passing from Nix's magic to Twilight's as the unicorn began to read.
What does it say? Did Nix do something bad?
Apple Bloom asked, her only experience with teachers' notes being when she had misbehaved at school.
No. It's just Cherliee asking me to make sure Nix knows about some subjects since she's starting partway through the school year.
Applejack whistled, reading the note over Twilight's shoulder.
That ain't just some subjects, Twi. That's a lot of book learning Nix is going to have to catch up on. Yes, but I'm sure with my help we'll get through it really quickly,
Twilight said confidently as she rolled up the note and put it back in Nix's saddlebags.
We'll, of course, start right away. We could probably get through some basic mathematics this afternoon if we hit it really hard.
Oh,
Apple Bloom muttered in disappointment.
What's the matter, Sugar Cube?
I wanted to ask Nix if she'd join the Cutie Mark Crusaders. I'm meeting Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle after they get out this afternoon from class so we can try to find our cutie marks, and Nix doesn't have hers either.
Well, them two friends don't get out of class till this afternoon, and you and I got errands to run. So how about you let Nix go get some learning done with Twilight, and then you and your friends can go find her at the library later.
Applejack glanced over to her unicorn friend.
That is, of course, if it's okay with Twilight.
Before the unicorn could even answer, both Apple Bloom and Nix were giving her the biggest, most pleading puppy dog eyes and begging smiles they could muster. It was enough to make Twilight giggle, nodding her head and drawing a pair of cheers from the young fillies. Diamond Tiara groaned as she dropped her face into her open book. She glared coldly at the letters on the page, even though she'd rather be staring her glare on a certain black filly. Nix had just asked another question, right before recess, and now Cherliee was continuing to lecture past the time they were supposed to go outside. Thankfully, the answer to Nix's question was short, and the fillies and colts of the school were soon free to run and play outside. Nix rushed out with Applebloom and Twist, the three running off to play on a bit of playground equipment. Diamond Tiara watched the black filly from across the playground with a glare, waiting for Silver Spoon to get outside.
Hey there, Diamond Tiara. How boring was that lesson?
Totally boring. And Nix just couldn't keep her mouth shut and had to ask another one of her dumb questions. Seriously, I don't know what's wrong with her. It's like she actually likes school.
A total egghead,
Silver Spoon agreed. She's been like this since she started class 2 weeks ago. I don't know why she keeps doing it, like every pony else hates it. Her only friends are those 3 blank flags and that other nerd Twist. Some pony needs to teach her a lesson about being so nerdy.
Yeah, hey, you want to put gum on her chair?
No, that wouldn't do it. It might make her cry, but that'll be it. If we're going to prank her, it needs to be a prank that teaches her not to be so curious.
Diamond Tiara said, shifting her gaze away from the black filly and to the forest trees in the distance. It was at this point that the bully began to smile. Diamond Tiara began grinning devilishly.
Oh, this is too perfect.
What is it?
Silver Spoon asked. Diamond Tiara motioned for Silver Spoon to get close before she started whispering in her friend's ear. Soon, Silver Spoon wore a similar grin to Diamond Tiara's, nodding her head in approval.
Oh, Diamond Tiara, that will teach her.
Bump, bump, sugar lump, rump.
The pair said in unison, doing their strange, special hoof shake before they laughed and began to stroll off and set their plans in motion.
Coming!
Twilight announced, strolling towards the door. She and Nix were in the middle of the filly's extra afternoon lessons, where she and Twilight worked to catch Nix up with the rest of the class. Nix was working on some math problems Twilight had written out for her when the unicorn went to answer the door.
Nix!
Twilight called from the door.
Yeah!
There are a couple of your friends from school here. You want to take a break and go play with them?
Nix was at the door in a flash, expecting Applebloom or Twist, but her smile turned into a frown when she saw Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon standing there.
Hey, Nix. We were just going to Sugar Cube Corner to get a snack. You want to come with?
Diamond Tiara offered, putting on a smile.
I really shouldn't. I've got a lot of studying to do.
Oh, nonsense,
Twilight said, using a leg to push Nix out the door. She then fetched the black filly's saddlebags and put a few bits into the right bag.
Go and have a break with your friends. Oh, and can you bring me back a sugar cookie? Pinkie Pie was bragging about how the sugar cookies she made this morning are her best ever, and I was hoping to try one.
But...
Nix stammered, the unicorn not quite picking up on Nix's lack of excitement. Before she knew it, she was already outside, with Twilight expecting her to buy snacks for both herself and the little fillies. Nix lowered her head and looked at the 2 other fillies in fear, afraid of what other mean things they would say to emotionally wound her. Instead, the 2 continued to smile, and they were strangely welcoming smiles.
So, Silver Spoon and I just wanted to apologize for being so mean.
You do?
Nix asked as she raised her head, utterly surprised to hear those words. It was the last thing she expected them to say.
Yeah, like we thought about what we did, and we're sorry we did it. It's not easy being the new kid in town, and it was wrong of us to be so mean to you.
That's okay. I forgive you.
Nix said with a weak smile, still anxious about being around the 2 bullies.
Still, you 2 said a lot of mean things. We know, but we gotta make sure the new ponies in town are cool.
Silver Spoon said as if judging a pony's coolness was their job.
So, all that was a test?
Nix asked in disbelief.
Yes,
assured Diamond Tiara.
And you passed. Congratulations.
But how is saying I have ticks a test?
Nix asked, focusing her questioning gaze on the grayish-pink filly. There was a moment of pause from Diamond Tiara, who smiled weakly as she glanced anxiously at Silver Spoon. Silver Spoon interrupted.
We wanted to make sure you actually cared about being covered in ticks. That way, we'd know whether or not you cared about being clean. Well, of course. What kind of pony would actually like being covered in ticks?
Nix asked.
A pony that's like a real weirdo.
Diamond Tiara answered, jumping back into the conversation. And you're obviously not a weirdo because you do care. Still, we are like, sorry we made you cry. We just had to be sure you were a cool pony.
And am I a cool pony?
Nyx asked anxiously. Silver Spoon nodded.
Totally cool. That's why we wanted to be, like, friends with you. Really?
Nyx asked with a grin, unable to hide her enthusiasm at having more friends.
Yeah, we could be like total BFFs.
Silver Spoon assured eagerly.
What's that?
Nyx asked as she began to walk with the other fillies.
BFFs. Best friends forever?
Diamond Tiara explained.
Oh, and just so you know, black is so totally cool.
Is it? Like, the coolest color ever. It makes you unique even if you don't have your cutie mark yet.
Silver Spoon assured.
Totally cool.
Diamond Tiara agreed.
Well, thanks. I'm glad we can be friends.
Nyx said, smiling. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon smiled as well, winking at each other behind Nyx's back before snickering.
What's so funny?
Oh, nothing. Just thinking of a joke Silver Spoon told me. Now, let's go get those sweets.
Really?
Nyx asked in disbelief as she sat with Silver Spoon and Diamond Tiara just outside Sugar Cube Corner, the three eating their snacks. Nyx levitated the food to her mouth, doing her best to remember all the lessons on being a proper mare that Rarity had taught her, since Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon seemed the kind of mares to care.
Oh, yes. The Everfree Forest is amazing once you get deep enough inside,
Diamond Tiara reassured Nyx. She and Silver Spoon had just spent the last half hour telling Nyx that while the Everfree Forest was scary on the outside, it was really an amazing place. Once you traveled far enough inside, Diamond Tiara said it became a beautiful place with all sorts of gentle animals and babbling brooks and huge fields of flowers. To Nyx, it sounded like the best place ever.
But I've been in the Everfree Forest with Twilight and I never saw anything like that. You must not have gone deep enough.
Silver Spoon answered quickly, brushing off Nyx's comment.
Still, you don't know what you're missing. It's like so beautiful,
Diamond Tiara said before perking up with a smile.
Hey, we should all go together.
I don't know,
Nyx said nervously.
I've been in there and it's really scary. And Twilight told me never to go back in there because of all the monsters. Look, there's nothing to be afraid of,
Silver Spoon insisted.
The main path is like enchanted or something. You stay on it and the monsters leave you alone. Oh, well, that's good, but...
Nyx hesitantly rubbed her forelegs together.
Twilight's expecting me back at the library.
Oh, don't worry. Silver Spoon and I will go tell her where we're going,
Diamond Tiara replied, reaching into her saddlebags and pulling out a map, on which she had drawn a dotted red line.
Just follow this map with the path we marked, and you'll get to the really beautiful part of the Everfree Forest. We'll be right behind you.
Nyx eyed the pair for a second, and then looked down at the map, biting her lower lip. Still, when she looked up and saw the very gentle and excited looks on Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon, she couldn't help but smile. Nyx picked up the map with her magic and stuck it into her saddlebags. She then took out some of the bits that Twilight had given her.
Well, okay. I'll see you there, but please remember to take Twilight a sugar cookie when you go tell her. Of course,
Silver Spoon said, taking the bits and standing up from the table.
I'll go buy the cookie right now.
Yeah, we'll go tell Twilight. You just go ahead, BFF.
Nyx nodded, jumping down from the table and trotting off in the direction of the forest. Diamond Tiara smiled, watching the black filly until she rounded a corner before bursting out into laughter. Diamond Tiara laughed until Silver Spoon came back out of Sugar Cube Corner carrying 2 freshly purchased cookies.
Oh, that was too easy.
Silver Spoon nodded, offering one of the cookies to Diamond Tiara.
Yeah, and we, got free cookies out of the deal.
This, Silver Spoon, was our best prank ever.
Totally.
The Grey Earth Pony replied, the pair high-hooving before digging into their ill-gotten cookies. Twilight trotted through the streets of Ponyville as she anxiously looked around. She hadn't seen Nyx in 2 hours and was starting to worry. She hadn't been able to find the young alicorn or the 2 fillies that had come to play with her. For the moment, however, she was willing to believe that they had just gotten caught up in playing and lost track of time. The unicorn trotted into the market and looked around, but saw no sign of Nix. She did, however, catch sight of Applejack. The farm pony was tending her market stand while keeping an eye on Applebloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle, who were trying to balance on top of each other. It was another attempt at getting their cutie marks, but one that Twilight didn't have the time to try and figure out.
Hey, Applejack. Hey there, Sugar Cube. What can I do for you? Want some Red Delicious, Gala, or maybe some Granny Smith apples? Applejack, you haven't seen Nix, have you?
Applejack cocked her head to one side.
Nix? Why, no, I haven't. Is she missing? I don't know.
The unicorn fretted as she glanced around.
2 fillies from her class came by to see if she could play, but that was 2 hours ago and I'm starting to worry.
Applejack chuckled, her eyes drifting over to Applebloom for a moment.
Oh, Twilight, I'm sure you got nothing to worry yourself about. You know fillies that age. They're probably off playing. I know, but it has been 2 hours. What 2 fillies came to play with Nix?
Applebloom asked as she and her friends walked up to the mares, having overheard the conversation.
I don't know their names. One was gray with a spoon cutie mark and a braid in her mane. The other had a swirled mane and a tiara. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon? Nix went to play with them?
Applebloom said, her voice carrying undertones of concern.
Yes. Is that bad?
Twilight asked, her concerns increasing from the filly's tone.
Twilight, those 2 are bullies.
Don't you remember how they made fun of me and called me a blank flank at Diamond Tiara's quinceañera?
Twilight's eyes narrowed as she remembered that day and the 2 fillies who teased Applebloom. She hadn't recognized them when they came to play with Nix because they didn't have their party dresses on.
Girls,
Applejack began, getting the attention of the 3 fillies.
I reckon you 3 better help Twilight find those 2. Do you know where they like to hang out? I know where Diamond Tiara lives. Her dad owns the shop here in town,
Sweetie Belle claimed.
My big sister Rarity is good friends with her father. Whenever I go to the shop with her, I usually see Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon doing their homework at this time of day. Take me there,
Twilight ordered. The 3 fillies abruptly saluted the unicorn, accepting her commands before galloping off, Twilight following a few steps behind. Nix shakily took out the map Diamond Tiara had given her, looking it over before looking up at the dark, foreboding path ahead. She didn't know how far along the path she was, but the line on her paper said she still had to keep going. The line crossed a river, and Nix could hear the babbling stream just ahead of her. Still, after she rounded a corner, Nix froze up, her eyes focusing on a large purple serpent that was splashing around in the water. Ducking behind a tree, Nix watched as the purple sea serpent with strangely well-styled orange hair ate his lunch, some rough gemstones he had gathered from the riverbed. Nix wasn't certain the serpent wouldn't turn down his gemstones to eat a little pony, so she decided to stay hidden and wait until he had left. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon weren't at the jewelry store, and Twilight was officially starting to panic. The Cutie Mark Crusaders had split up, each going to fetch help. Applebloom and Sweetie Belle ran to get their big sisters, while Scootaloo used her scooter to quickly race out of Ponyville to where Rainbow Dash was practicing tricks. That left Twilight to continue to run around Ponyville, trying to find the 2 fillies who had last been seen with Nix. She began asking any pony she came across, growing more frantic as more time passed. Where were they? Where was Nix? Twilight! The unicorn turned skyward, seeing Rainbow Dash circling above her. I found them! This way! With that, the Pegasus banked, flying off to another part of Ponyville. Twilight galloped as fast as her hooves would carry her. It was only a few blocks of running, but after rounding a corner, Twilight saw Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon. Hey, you want to do this? Rainbow Dash asked. Go find the others, and have them meet me in the town square, just in case we have to go and try to find Nix. I'll deal with these 2. You got it, Rainbow Dash said as she sped off to gather all the others. Twilight watched her friend leave for a moment before turning her eyes on the park bench, glowering as she approached the 2 fillies. Hey, you 2! Twilight snapped, making the 2 fillies jump. Still, the shock was short-lived as the pair's expression shifted to annoyance and disinterest. Oh, look, Silver Spoon, it's the town's librarian. What, trying to find ponies with overdue books? Diamond Tiara teased. Where is Nix? Who is that? We don't know Nix, do we, Silver Spoon?
It doesn't ring a bell.
Silver Spoon said behind a giggle. Diamond Tiara would have joined in the giggle, but the laughter had died in her chest as her eyes fell on Twilight Sparkle. While reports of such things are rare, exceptionally magically inclined unicorns were said to be able to perform a rage shift, where their anger feeds into their magic and causes a physical change in their bodies. Twilight had experienced one such rage shift when she was trying to understand Pinkie Pie's sixth sense, and today would be the second occurrence. Mane and tail were set ablaze by her rage-driven magic, eyes glowing red, and her coat a bright, angry white. Twilight glared down at Diamond Tiara like she was a pony of the apocalypse. "Unless you want me to turn you into a cactus, you will tell me where Nyx is right now."
She's in the Everfree Forest,"
Diamond Tiara squeaked out in fear.
We told her that the forest got really nice if you got deep enough and gave her a map. She left from Sugar Cube Corner and that's the last we saw of her."
Twilight's rage shift ended, her mane, tail, and coat returning to normal as her eyes narrowed to pinpoints. Without another word, Twilight spun on her hooves and galloped back towards the center of Ponyville, where Rainbow Dash would be gathering the others. It would be getting dark soon, and the Everfree Forest only got more dangerous in the dark. Nyx trembled, just barely keeping herself from moving without crying. If only she didn't attract the attention of any monsters. It had gotten dark, and the forest had gotten very, very scary. The little filly looked around the path anxiously, looking at the many long shadows, seeing things that may or may not have been there. It was only by some miracle that the moon was 3/4 full, providing plenty of light to see the path ahead. Nyx had given up on trying to find the nice part of the forest. Now all she wanted to do was get back to Ponyville, but she had lost her map. Something had startled her, a rustling in the bushes, and when she ran, she left the map behind. Now she was wandering aimlessly, hoping to recognize a landmark. She tried to follow the paths that were familiar, ones that looked like parts of the forest she had seen before. Still, she hadn't even crossed the river again, the one landmark Nyx was desperately hoping to see, even if the sea serpent had returned. Following a bend in the path, Nyx came to a stop as her eyes fell on an aged and worn stone. A creaky rope bridge hung over a deep expanse, shifting gently from side to side. On the far side was the ruins of an ancient castle, long forgotten and partially overtaken by the Everfree Forest. It was something Nyx knew she hadn't passed on her way into the forest, and yet it was strangely familiar. Curiosity starting to replace fear, Nyx carefully stepped out onto the bridge, crossing the expanse. Thankfully, none of the wooden planks gave way, so Nyx was able to cross to the other side without incident. Still, the filly looked up at the long-forgotten castle, something beginning to bubble up in her mind. Nyx trying to force whatever it was away, trying to clear her head, but the blurry images and voices persisted, playing out inside her head. "Oh, my beloved subjects, it's been so long since I've seen your precious little sun-loving faces."
"What did you do with our princess?"
"Whoa there, Nellie."
"Why, am I not regal enough for you? Don't you know who I am?"
Ooh, more guessing games. Hokey Smokes, how about Queen Meanie? No, Black Snooty.
Does my crown no longer count now that I've been imprisoned for 1,000 years? Did you not recall the legend? Did you not see the signs?
I did, and I know who you are. You're the Mare in the Moon. Nightmare Moon.
Well. Some pony who remembers me. Then you also know why I'm here.
You're here to...
Remember this day, little ponies, for it was your last. From this moment forth, the night will last forever! Ha 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 ha! Nyx shook her head, finally managing to banish the blurred thoughts that had overtaken her. She had recognized some of the voices. She had heard Twilight, but there was a voice she shouldn't have recognized, but did. The voice of an older mare, the one who laughed in the end. It was a voice that Nyx felt like she remembered, but couldn't recall who it belonged to. Putting the strange occurrence outside of her mind, the filly began to climb the steps to the castle. She didn't know why, but she had to see the inside, no matter how scary the Everfree Forest was. It was as if the castle was calling out to her. She climbed steps, navigated old hallways, and eventually entered the one remaining tower. There were no defining features to the room, which had suffered under the passage of time, but Nyx recognized that it was the palace's throne room, and it felt, like she'd been there before. The little filly stepped out into the center of the room, looking up at the broken glass windows at the far end. She then winced in pain, images bursting to the front of her mind. They were far more aggressive than the images from before, and they were much clearer. They would not be ignored, shoving all her other thoughts out of Nyx's mind as they demanded her attention. She realized they were memories, that she could remember standing at the far end of the room, looking across it. In the memory, she was looking down at a small purple unicorn, a unicorn she knew. Twilight. "You little fool! Thinking you could defeat me! Now you will never see your princess or your son! The night will last forever!" Nyx could remember herself saying those words. She could remember herself thinking them. But even worse, she could remember the feelings behind those thoughts. She wanted to hurt Twilight, to punish the unicorn for trying to thwart her. She was thinking about banishing her, imprisoning her, even torturing her. Nyx struggled against the memory. No, she shouldn't want to hurt Twilight. Twilight was the kindest pony she knew. It was Twilight who took care of her, who taught her, who read her to sleep at night with storybooks. It was Twilight who had found her in the forest. She didn't want to hurt Twilight. Dark shadows shifted around the room. Dispelled magic that had lain dormant being awoken by Nyx's presence. Trails of indigo smoke began to creep towards Nyx, and, as the magic began to seep into her, the memory continued despite how much Nyx wanted it to stop. She saw Twilight with her friends, saw Twilight giving a long speech about elements, and then there was a bright light. A light so bright that it hurt to look at, and she had to shield herself from it with her wing. And then there was a rainbow. But not a nice pretty rainbow. No. The rainbow lunged at her like an angry snake, encircling her. It burned. It was burning her away, tearing her away from something else. It was like a savage animal with razor-sharp claws, tearing her to ribbons despite her cries. Nyx collapsed to the floor of the castle, panting heavily as the painful memory finally relented. Despite the cool feel of the castle's stone floor, the filly could still feel the burning pain of the rainbow, how it had cut and tore at her. Other thoughts began to bubble up to the surface as more and more of the indigo smoke began to draw in from the room and feed into Nyx. The thoughts were desires, hateful desires. Desires to hurt ponies, to make them pay for ignoring her. Memories of being scorned and ignored. Memories of jealousy and anguish. Amongst these thoughts, a few were beginning to stand out. Thoughts that mingled with Nyx's latest memories of her friends, of Twilight. They began to poison those memories, filling them with hatred. She wanted to hurt Twilight. She wanted to make her suffer, to torture her. These were thoughts that Nyx didn't want to have, the little filly clapping her hooves against the side of her head as she called out into the silence.
"No! I don't want to hurt Twilight! She takes care of me! She teaches me things and lets me go to school! I don't want to hurt her!"
Yet the thought continued relentlessly. Thoughts of how she would hurt Twilight, how she would torture her, snap off her horn, keep her locked in a dungeon. Horrible thoughts that started to make Nyx physically ill.
"No! I don't want to hurt Twilight! I don't want to!"
The thoughts were reaching a boil. As Nyx tried to push them away, more rose in their place. Thoughts of how she'd hurt Twilight and her friends and make the unicorn suffer. How she'd go after Twilight's family. All the ways she could break the unicorn's spirit.
"No! No, 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 no!"
With that final scream, something sparked to life inside Nyx, the filly alicorn's eyes glowing white. The creeping tendrils of indigo smoke suddenly shifted, swirling faster and faster as they were being sucked down into the filly like water in a whirlpool. At the same time, the dark desires began to fade, ebbing away and leaving as Nyx floated up into the air. When the last traces of the indigo cloud were gone, Nyx's horn sparked, a crack of lightning lancing up from her horn and into the sky with a thunderous boom. Celestia bolted up in bed and turned her eyes to her window, through which she could see Ponyville and the Everfree Forest. Her breathing was still as she stretched out her magic and senses. For a moment, it felt like... No, that was impossible. She could sense Luna in the castle, in the main hall. But this presence... It was short-lived, but she had sensed her presence. A presence the Sun Princess hoped to never see again. In another part of Canterlot, a dark blue unicorn with turquoise eyes, who was sitting in his study, also looked out his window. His eyes remained focused on the window for a time, looking beyond it to the distant Everfree Forest. He shut the book he had been reading, a complex spellbook on theoretical resurrection magic. The figure quickly moved to the door of his study, opening it and calling out into the hallways to the stately manner. "Proper etiquette!" "You called, sir?" The butler pony replied, quickly zipping up. He was an all-white unicorn with a collar and tie around his neck and a monocle over his right eye, his eyes turquoise as well. "Have messages sent to Miss Greygale, Miss Nightwind, and Mr. Stonewall. I need to speak with them right away, this evening if possible." "Of course, sir. I will have them summoned immediately." Twilight cried out, tripping over her own hooves as she landed in a heap on the side of the path. She and her friends had been racing through the Everfree Forest when a bolt of lightning launched itself up into the sky. Twilight had been in the lead, galloping as quickly as her legs would carry her when she heard the thunder. It made her jump, causing her to tumble head over hooves before crashing hard against the ground. Rarity and Fluttershy quickly galloped up to assist Twilight while the others were transfixed skyward where they had just seen the bolt of magic.
Whoa, did you see that?
Dash asked, the Pegasus pointing skyward.
Sure did, Sugar Cube. Where do you reckon it came from? Oh, the Everfree Forest!
Pinkie Pie chirped.
Well, no duh, Pinkie Pie,
Rainbow Dash pointed out.
We're kind of in the Everfree Forest. Of course, silly. That's how I knew the bolt of lightning came from here.
Dash slapped a hoof to her forehead while Twilight struggled to her hooves.
Twilight, dear, are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. I just tripped,
Twilight assured, pushing her friend away as her horn glowed. The group had just stopped momentarily at the library before heading out into the forest, getting a compass and map. Pinkie Pie had volunteered to carry the map in her curly mane, while the compass hung from Twilight's neck by a thin piece of string. The unicorn drew both items out, levitating them in the air as she looked skyward.
Okay,
Twilight began after taking a breath to calm herself.
Where was that bolt of lightning again? Right over there,
Pinkie Pie answered, pointing at the sky with her hooves. Twilight quickly positioned herself by Pinkie Pie, holding up the compass as she turned the map over in the air.
Okay, using the mountains as reference, we're about here. And if we're here and the lightning bolt was there, then the lightning bolt came from...
Twilight fell silent, staring at the map. She double-checked her rough measurements and guesses, but in the pit of her stomach, she knew she was right.
I know where Nyx is,
Twilight said, dropping the map and compass in the mud.
And I need to get to her right now.
But Sugar Cube, how do you... Applejack began to ask, only to be cut off as the bright light enveloped Twilight, the unicorn disappearing as she teleported away. Twilight reappeared, looking around the room she had not been in since the last summer sun celebration. The throne room in the ancient castle of the Royal Pony Sisters where she and her friends had defeated Nightmare Moon. The room was just as Twilight remembered it, except for a single small detail. Nyx was lying in the center of the room, allowing Twilight to have a brief moment of relief before powerful fear gripped her chest. Nyx's normal mane and tail were gone, replaced with flowing masses of star-dotted magic. The filly now looked much more like Nightmare Moon, lacking only the armor, eyeshadow, and cutie mark. This was her fears made real. With that mane and tail, could she deny the truth any longer? Could she honestly believe that the cultist spell had not accomplished its intended purpose? Nyx was young, but the magical mane and tail, there was no denying she was... crying. Nyx's wails filled Twilight's ears, derailing her train of thought. She was bawling her eyes out, her cries filling the room. For a moment, Twilight had to catch herself, having already taken a few steps forward. She wanted to comfort Nyx, to tell her everything was okay. She was terrified, more so than she had been the night Twilight found her. She couldn't dismiss Nyx's resemblance to Nightmare Moon, especially now that the filly had the mane and the tail the Mare of the Moon was infamous for. Yet, would Nightmare Moon be crying like that? Would she be wailing so loudly? Unable to bear it any more, Twilight inched towards Nyx. When she was close enough, she reached out and gave Nyx a gentle touch. The filly spun her head around, a frightened look in her eyes. That fear, however, died almost immediately as Nyx scrambled to her hooves and pressed herself against Twilight, embracing the purple unicorn.
Twilight! Nyx bawled. Shh, it'll be okay. It's okay. Twilight reassured, cautiously wrapping her hooves around Nyx as the filly trembled and buried her head in Twilight's neck. I'm sorry. Please don't hate me, please. I don't want to hurt you. Nyx wailed, her voice muffled. Twilight's heart skipped a beat as she fought the urge to pull away. Hurt me? When did you want to... I don't know. The alicorn filly sobbed miserably. I came in here, and then I remember looking down on you. We were both here, and you looked so scared, and I was happy to see you were scared, and I wanted to hurt you, but because you tried to stop me from doing something, but I don't want to hurt you, Twilight. Please don't hate me. I don't want to hurt you. Twilight felt a tension in her chest, a physical manifestation of conflict growing in her mind. It was like the night she found Nyx. She saw the resemblance the filly had with Nightmare Moon, and yet she saw Nyx's fear of how utterly terrified the filly was at the time. Now, Nyx wasn't only scared, she was apologizing. Apologizing for things that Nightmare Moon had done, had thought, had felt. It was another sign that worried Twilight, because if Nyx had memories from Nightmare Moon, then it was almost conclusive evidence that the two were once one and the same. Yet, as Twilight looked down at the filly crying into her neck, she just couldn't see Nightmare Moon. The alicorn Twilight had fought wouldn't be crying like this. Nyx just wasn't the same. Nyx loved the sun, had friends, and was curious about the world. These were all traits that didn't fit with Nightmare Moon. No, she knew Nyx. The filly had been living with her for weeks, and Twilight had tried to keep herself distant. She didn't believe Nyx was Nightmare Moon before, but at the same time she had tried not to become attached. Yet, she was reading stories to Nyx at bedtime, helping the filly with her schoolwork. She had run into the Everfree Forest in the middle of the night to find Nyx. Twilight still wasn't sure what Nyx was or how much of, if anything, she shared with Nightmare Moon, beyond the physical similarities. She did, however, know one thing. Nyx was crying, terrified of her own memories. Terrified of the fact that, at some point, she had wanted to hurt some pony. Twilight just couldn't ignore Nyx's suffering. I know you don't. Twilight finally comforted, hooking a leg around Nyx as she embraced the filly. It's okay. I know you don't want to hurt me. Twilight's words, however, were not enough to comfort Nyx. She continued to cry, begging Twilight's forgiveness. Again and again, Twilight said that it was okay, but she did not force Nyx to stop. The filly needed to cry, to get it all out. She had remembered something terrible, something she couldn't understand, and it scared her. There was a chance that Nyx was Nightmare Moon, and there was still a small chance that the filly had just looked like Nightmare Moon. All that, however, didn't matter at the moment. What mattered was she needed to comfort Nyx, assure the filly that everything was okay, and that she didn't hate her. She just had to be there, to be a comforting adult for a filly who was terrified of her own memories. And there we have Chapter 3 of Past Sins. Join me next week, though I don't know what I'm reading yet. It could be that another chapter of something amazing comes out, but if not, I suppose we'll just have to go on with Past Sins Chapter 4. This is Vos de Sueños signing off. Safe travels.